Right, so this happened a good few years back, but it still freaks me right out whenever there's a proper downpour. I was 19, living on my own for the first time in a little one-bedroom flat above a chippy in a sleepy village in the Cotswolds. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, your neighbors said hello on the street, and the biggest drama was usually who won the village bake-off. That night though, it felt different. The rain had been hammering down for hours, a relentless drumming that seemed to vibrate the walls themselves. The wind howled like a banshee outside, rattling the old windows in their frames. There was a power cut too, which wasn't unheard of in the village, but with the storm raging it felt especially unwelcome. I fumbled around lighting candles, the flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The flat wasn't exactly spacious, so the flickering candlelight reached most corners. But there was this little alcove tucked just beside the fireplace, a kind of built-in cupboard space that barely held a couple of boxes. It was always a bit dark in there, even in daylight, and with the flickering candles, it seemed to swallow the light whole. I tried to ignore it, focusing on getting a cup of tea going on the tiny gas hob in the kitchen. The wind seemed to pick up then, a sudden, howling gust that rattled the windows with a vicious groan. I swear for a second the whole building seemed to sway. My heart jumped, sloshing the hot water in the kettle, and I scalded my hand slightly. Muttering a curse, I ran the burn under the cold tap, wincing at the sting. Just as the throb in my hand started to ease, I heard it. A noise. Faint, barely there, but definitely not the wind. It sounded like scratching. Like fingernails scraping against wood. It came from the direction of the alcove. Now, my flat wasn't exactly haunted territory. Sure, the old building had its creaks and groans, but nothing like this. My stomach lurched, and a cold sweat prickled my skin. Maybe it was just a branch from a nearby tree scraping against the wall in the wind. But the sound seemed to come from inside. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed a heavy metal spatula from the draining board, not exactly Ghostbusters equipment, but it was the best I had. Slowly, I inched towards the alcove, the scraping sound stopping abruptly as I did. I held my breath, the only sounds the hammering rain and the frantic thudding of my own heart. Reaching the alcove, I braced myself and peered in. It was pitch black. The stupid flickering candlelight didn't reach here at all. For a moment, I debated getting a proper torch from my bedroom, but the thought of turning away, leaving whatever was in there unseen, sent a fresh wave of terror down my spine. Squinting into the darkness, I tentatively reached out with the spatula, feeling blindly for the source of the sound. My fingers brushed against rough wood, sending shivers down my spine. Nothing else. Just the back wall of the alcove. Relief washed over me, so strong it almost made my legs buckle. I let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish for letting a stupid noise scare me so badly. Maybe it was a loose floorboard after all. I turned to head back to the kitchen, ready to forget the whole thing. That's when I saw it. A sliver of white, stark against the blackness. It was a fingernail. Long, pale, and definitely not mine. It protruded from beneath a loose floorboard at the very back of the alcove. Panic surged through me, cold and suffocating. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase full of dried flowers in the process. The clatter echoed in the sudden silence, the scraping sound starting again, with a renewed frenzy. This time, it was accompanied by a muffled thumping, like something was trying to push through. My mind raced. I had to get out. Now. I didn't care about the storm, the darkness, or anything else. I just needed to get away. Scrambling to my feet, I knocked over a chair in my haste, the sound barely registering over the pounding in my ears. I reached the front door, fumbling with the ancient lock in the dim candlelight. It felt like an eternity before the door finally swung open, revealing a wall of rain and howling wind. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself out into the storm, slamming the door shut behind me. The rain soaked me through instantly, the wind whipping my hair into a frenzy. I didn't care. I just ran. Barefoot and soaked to the bone, I sprinted down the deserted street, the storm masking the sound of my ragged breaths. I didn't look back, the image of that pale fingernail seared into my brain. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, I reached Mr. Jones' house, the kind old man who lived a few houses down. I hammered on his door, tears stinging my eyes and rain blurring my vision. Finally, a light flickered on inside. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing Mr. Jones' sleep-tousled face. "Sarah." "What in the world?" he began, but I cut him off, my voice a choked sob. "Something's wrong. In my flat. There's something there." Concern flickered across his face. He ushered me inside, his warm house a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. As I stammered out my story, the color drained from his face. "The alcove," he whispered, his voice tight. "You shouldn't have gone near it." Fear prickled my skin. "What do you mean?" I demanded, but before he could answer, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by a blood-curdling scream. It was my scream. I recognized it instantly, the sheer terror in it sending a fresh wave of panic through me. Mr. Jones grabbed his coat, his face grim. "Stay here," he barked, and rushed out into the storm. I huddled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, the warmth doing little to dispel the chilling dread that had taken hold. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind, sent me skittering closer to the edge. It felt like an eternity before Mr. Jones stumbled back through the door, his face ashen. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just shook his head slowly. "The police are on their way," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "The rest is a blur." Flashing lights, sirens, hushed voices. They wouldn't let me back into my flat. Later, a police officer, his face kind but weary, explained what they found. The floorboards in the alcove had been pried up. Underneath, hidden for who knows how long, was the body of a young woman. They hadn't been able to identify her yet, but... He hesitated, then continued, there were signs of a struggle. "Anne, she was missing a fingernail." The blood drained from my face. The pale sliver I'd seen, the frantic scratching. It wasn't something trying to get in. It was something trying to get out. They never caught whoever did it. The village was never the same. The warm, friendly atmosphere was replaced by a chilling sense of unease. As for me, I moved away soon after. The nightmares still come sometimes, the image of that pale fingernail a constant reminder of the horror I witnessed. And whenever the rain hammers down and the wind howls, I can't help but think of the girl trapped in the darkness, forever clawing for escape.